All right, ready to dive in. Today, we're tackling something you use probably every day, but you probably don't think much about it. We're talking about the paperclip.
Yeah, it's one of those objects that just blends into the background.
Exactly. But trust me, there's a lot more to the paperclip than meets the eye. And for you, with your interest in industrial design, this is going to be especially interesting. We're going to be looking at how this really simple object has this surprisingly complicated history.
It really shows how even the simplest things can have these fascinating stories behind them, and they connect to bigger things like trends in design and technology and all that.
That's a great point. And we've got some really interesting sources for this deep dive. Like, we've got excerpts from a student paper about something called Operation Paperclip. Kind of mysterious title, right?
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But first, we've also got some Wikipedia entries on the paperclip itself and a guy named Johan Vaaler, who's often credited as the inventor. But then we also have a patent for something totally different, like detecting metallic objects in document scanners.
Okay, that's a bit of a jump.
Right. And to round things out, we've even got a Smithsonian article about historical anniversaries and a little bit from a book by Henry Petrosky. He's like the guru of everyday objects. He wrote The Pencil and all those books.
Oh, yeah, I've read some of his work, The Evolution of Useful Things. That's a classic.
Exactly. So we've got this really cool mix of sources, and we're going to try to piece together the story of the paperclip and see what it tells us about design and innovation and even history.
Should be interesting to see where this goes.
Yeah, it's kind of a mystery, even to me. Okay, so let's start by tackling the big paperclip myth. The inventor. Most people think Johan Vaaler, this Norwegian guy, invented the paperclip, but it's not that straightforward.
Yeah, it's way more complicated than that. He did get a patent in the early 1900s, but his design, not the one that really took off.
So there were other paperclips floating around back then.
Oh, yeah. The design that we all kind of know and love today, the one everyone recognizes, it's called the gem. And get this, it actually predates Vaaler's patent by quite a bit, actually.
Hold on, so how did he get a patent if something similar like the gem already existed? That doesn't seem right.
Good question. And it actually reveals a lot about how patents worked way back then. They were, let's just say, more forgiving. Like, you could get a patent for a pretty minor tweak to something that already existed.
So even if there was already a better design out there like the gem, this guy could still get a patent for his version.
Pretty much. It really highlights how, the legal and historical context can totally shape how things are designed and how innovation happens.
Okay, that's wild. So even though this Vaaler guy didn't actually invent the gem paperclip, the paperclip itself became a big deal in Norway during World War II, right?
Absolutely. Norway was under Nazi occupation, and Norwegians were forbidden from wearing any symbols of their country, like the king's cipher or the Norwegian flag.
I can imagine that was really tough, like losing your identity.
Yeah, totally. So they started wearing paper clips as this subtle way of showing unity and resistance. It's pretty amazing. This tiny little object became this powerful symbol.
Wow, that gives me chills. Like, they turned this everyday thing into a secret language, a way to connect with each other when they couldn't openly express their patriotism.
Exactly. It shows how objects can take on these meanings that go way beyond their original purpose, especially during times of conflict or social change.
Okay, so we've debunked the whole inventor thing,
Yeah.
and we've got this paperclip as a symbol of resistance. But there's another layer to this. The gem paperclip itself, the one we all know, its origins are still kind of a mystery.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? We know it was already around and people were already talking about how great it was as early as 1883, so it was clearly already out there being used. But who actually invented it? Nobody knows.
That blows my mind. Something so common, something we use all the time. We have no idea who came up with it.
It makes you think, right? How many great designs have just kind of been forgotten, lost to history, and how many inventors never got the credit they deserved?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's kind of humbling in a way.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's fast forward a bit, jump into the modern era. We've got this U.S. patent that talks about detecting metallic objects in document scanners, specifically mentioning paper clips.
Right, and this brings up a really important idea for industrial designers. The whole life cycle of a product. You got to think beyond just what it's supposed to do and think about what might go wrong,
Like paper clips getting stuck in scanners and jamming them up.
Exactly. or even damaging important documents.
Yeah.
So even something as simple as a paperclip, it can have these unintended consequences. And good design has to take that into account.
Yeah, that makes sense. You want something that's functional, but also doesn't cause more problems than it solves.
Exactly. And, I was reading this patent, and they get into all this detail about the shapes and materials of paper clips. It's almost like they're writing poetry about office supplies.
That's funny. Okay, speaking of unexpected twists and turns, let's talk about this Operation Paperclip thing. This is where things get really interesting.
Definitely a fascinating, albeit complex, chapter of history. After World War II, the U.S. government started this program to bring German scientists to America.
And the goal was to tap into their knowledge,
Right.
especially in areas like rocketry and stuff like that.
Exactly. And this is where that student paper comes in. It really digs into the ethical questions surrounding Operation Paperclip.
Like, was it right to bring over these scientists, some of whom might have been involved in some not-so-great things during the war?
Right. So it brings up this whole dilemma about, benefiting from the knowledge of people who might have been complicit in some pretty awful stuff. It's a really complex issue.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a tough thing to grapple with. And the paper actually names some of these scientists. Wernher von Braun, Hubertus Dryhold, Otto Ambros, Walter Schieber, Kurt Blohm, and Friedrich Hoffmann.
And it's important to remember that while these guys made significant contributions to science and technology, their past can't be ignored. It definitely adds a whole other dimension to the story.
Yeah, for sure. It makes you think about the responsibility of scientists and engineers and how their work can be used for good or bad.
Right. It's not just about the technical stuff, it's about the human side of things, too. The ethical considerations, the potential consequences, all of that.
It's like, with great power comes great responsibility, right?
Exactly. And designers and engineers, they hold a lot of power in shaping the world we live in.
This is already more complex than I thought it would be. A paperclip is more than just a paperclip.
Definitely. It's a window into all sorts of things. History, technology, ethics, you name it.
And we're just getting started. We'll dive deeper into all of this after the break.
It's a question that really has no easy answers, right? And it kind of makes you think about the moral responsibilities of, people involved in scientific discoveries, especially when there's a war going on.
Right. Heavy stuff. So, with all these different things we've learned about paperclips, I'm curious, what are some key takeaways for someone studying industrial design today?
Well, I think one big takeaway is understanding the historical context of design. Like, the paperclip story shows how something so simple can be tied to major historical events and social movements.
So it's not just about knowing how to use the latest software or whatever, it's also about knowing the history of your field, right?
Absolutely. It gives you a foundation to build upon. It helps you understand how design trends emerge and evolve, how we got to where we are today.
It's kind of like if you want to understand how cars work, you got to know something about the history of the wheel, right?
Exactly. And the paperclip also shows us the social and ethical side of design. Every object we create, no matter how small or how simple, it has the potential to impact the world in ways we might not even imagine.
Like how the paperclip became a symbol of resistance in Norway, or how the scientists brought over through Operation Paperclip. They made some big contributions to science, but with this whole complicated backstory.
Yeah, good examples. It's
Yeah.
a good reminder that design doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's always part of this bigger picture, this complex web of social, political, and ethical stuff.
So as designers, how do we navigate all of that? Is there like an ethical checklist we can use to make sure our creations are used for good?
Well, it's not really about checklists. It's more about having a critical mindset throughout the whole design process, asking yourself questions like, who will benefit from this product? Could it be used in harmful ways? Are we reinforcing existing inequalities or biases? Those are important.
So it's about constantly thinking about the potential impact of what you're creating, both good and bad.
Exactly. And talking about it with other people, getting different perspectives, being willing to question your own assumptions. That's how we can move towards a more responsible and ethical way of designing.
Wow, this deep dive has really opened my eyes. I never would have thought a tiny paperclip could be so thought-provoking.
Right. It just shows you never know where curiosity might lead you. Sometimes the most ordinary objects can reveal these amazing hidden histories and spark some really important conversations.
Totally. Okay, let's circle back to the paperclip itself for a minute. We've been talking a lot about the gem design, but I'm wondering what makes it so successful? I mean, it's been around for over 100 years, And it's still the most popular paperclip out there.
I think the gem paperclip is a perfect example of form and function working together. It's simple, it's efficient, it's easy to use, and it just works.
Like a good pair of jeans, you know? Comfortable, reliable, always gets the job done.
I love that analogy. And just like a well-made pair of jeans, the gem is super durable. You can bend it and unbend it over and over again, and it just keeps on gripping.
It's the workhorse of the paperclip world. So what can designers today learn from the gem's success? What makes it such a design icon?
I think one key takeaway is understanding user needs. The gem is so easy to use, it grips the paper securely without tearing it, and it stores neatly without getting all tangled up. It just makes sense intuitively.
So even the most innovative design has to be user-friendly, right?
Yeah.
People want things that make their lives easier, not more complicated.
Exactly. And the gem also shows the importance of durability. Good design takes into account the entire life cycle of a product, including how well it holds up over time.
Yeah, making things that last, especially in today's world where so many things are disposable, that seems like a really important thing for designers to consider.
Absolutely. It's not just about the user satisfaction, it's also about minimizing the environmental impact. Things that last longer, they create less waste, which is good for everyone.
So the Gem Paperclip is like a masterclass in user-centered design, durability, and even sustainability. It's like the perfect role model for aspiring industrial designers.
It really shows us that even the simplest objects can embody timeless design principles.
It's like they say, sometimes the simplest solution is the best.
Totally. And in a world where everyone's always trying to come up with the next big thing, it's refreshing to see a design that stood the test of time by sticking to its core function, just doing what it's supposed to do and doing it well.
Speaking of history and design, remember that Smithsonian article we mentioned earlier? The one with all the historical anniversaries? Some of those really stood out to me.
Oh, yeah, that was a fun one. Lots of interesting stuff in there. What caught your eye?
Well, there was a 400th anniversary of Shakespeare's death, the 300th anniversary of Capability Brown's birth. He was this famous landscape architect. The 200th anniversary of Charlotte Bronte's birth, and the 125th anniversary of Carnegie Hall. They even mentioned the 90th anniversary of the first Winnie the Pooh book.
Wow, that's quite a mix. From literary giants to architectural visionaries, music, and even children's literature. It's amazing how all these different anniversaries, like the paperclip, connect to the world of design in some way.
Right. Like, think about Shakespeare's plays. They've inspired countless set designs, costumes, props. It's all about creating this visual language that brings his words to life on stage.
Yeah, theatrical design is a whole world unto itself. It's where creativity and technical skill come together to create these really immersive experiences for the audience.
And then you've got Capability Brown, the father of landscape architecture. His designs for English gardens, with their rolling hills, serene lakes, and perfectly placed trees, they're like masterpieces of both aesthetics and functionality.
Totally agree. His work shows how design can shape our experience of nature, create spaces for reflection and recreation, and even enhance the ecological balance of a landscape.
And speaking of shaping experiences, think about Carnegie Hall. The architecture, the acoustics, even the way the seating is arranged. It's all carefully designed to create this incredible musical experience.
Yeah, it's proof that design can elevate art forms, create spaces that inspire and transport us, and really enhance our appreciation for beauty.
And we can't forget about Winnie the Pooh. From the illustrations in the books to all the merchandise, theme parks, and different adaptations, it's a whole universe of design inspired by those characters and their world.
It's amazing, right? The power of character design, storytelling through visuals, and creating worlds that capture the imagination.
So what can all these seemingly random anniversaries teach us as designers?
Well, I think they remind us that design is all around us. It's shaping our lives in countless ways, from the clothes we wear to the spaces we live in, the stories we experience, the things that make us who we are.
So it's about being aware of the design that's all around us, seeing the world with the designer's eye, and recognizing how it can inspire us, delight us, challenge us, and even change the world.
Exactly. And to approach design with a sense of history, appreciating the people who came before us, and being committed to creating a better future through our work.
This deep dive has really shown how much we can learn from the past. Even something as simple as a paperclip can teach us so much about design, innovation, and the impact our creations have on the world.
Yeah, it really makes you think about the choices we make as designers and how those choices can have these ripple effects, you know?
Absolutely. It's not just about aesthetics or functionality. It's about responsibility, too.
Right, right. And it's fascinating how all these different things we talked about, like Shakespeare, landscape architecture, concert halls, even Winnie the Pooh, they all kind of come back to this idea of design shaping our experiences.
Yeah, it's like design is this invisible force that's constantly influencing us, shaping the world around us, whether we realize it or not.
And that's a pretty powerful thing when you think about it.
Definitely. And for you, being interested in industrial design, it's like this is your chance to be part of that force, you know?
Yeah, that's a cool way to think about it. To use design to make a positive impact, to solve problems, to make the world a better place.
Exactly. It's a big responsibility, but it's also an incredible opportunity. This deep dive has been a wild ride. We started with a humble paperclip and ended up exploring all these different facets of design and history and ethics.
Yeah, it just goes to show you never know where a little curiosity might lead you.
So to wrap things up, I guess the big question is, what happens now? What do we do with all this information, all these insights?
Well, I think the first step is to just be aware,
Hmm.
to be mindful of the history and the impact of design, to ask questions, to challenge assumptions, to think critically about the choices we make as designers.
And to remember that even the simplest objects, like the paperclip, can have these amazing stories and hidden meanings.
Exactly. So next time you reach for a paperclip, take a moment to appreciate it. Think about its journey. The people who invented it, the people who used it as a symbol of resistance, the unintended consequences, all of it.
And remember that as a designer, you have the power to shape the future. Use that power wisely.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us in this deep dive.
Until next time.
Keep those minds curious.